The snow shovel hit the driveway concrete with a metallic scrape that shattered the pre-dawn silence. And I knew within seconds someone would be watching me from behind their curtains. My name is Frank Norris, and at 4:30 in the morning on a Tuesday in January, I was clearing snow from my driveway in Lakewood, Colorado, with an urgency that most people would find excessive. Most people didn't know what I knew. Most people didn't have a wife 8 months pregnant with complications that could turn critical at any moment. The neighborhood was one of those pristine developments where every house looked like it came from the same catalog, just in different colors. Maple Ridge Estates had been our dream home 3 years ago when we moved in. Now it felt like living under a microscope, with the HOA monitoring every blade of grass, every holiday decoration, and apparently every snowflake I dared to move before 6 in the morning. Linda, my wife, was asleep upstairs. Her doctor had been clear yesterday during our appointment. The preeclampsia was getting worse. Any sudden change could mean an emergency trip to the hospital, and with Colorado's winter storms, every minute would count. The snowstorm had dumped 8 inches overnight, with another 6 predicted before noon. I had already shoveled at midnight, but the snow had kept falling, relentless and heavy. My breath came out in white clouds as I worked, the shovel biting into the fresh powder. The motion sensor lights I had installed last week illuminated my work area, casting long shadows across the pristine white landscape. I had maybe 40 more minutes of work to clear not just my driveway, but also a path wide enough for an ambulance to navigate the narrow street. Our house sat at the end of a cul-de-sac, and the city plows always took hours to reach us. I was halfway down the driveway when I heard the front door slam across the street. Margaret Peterson stood on her porch in a purple bathrobe, her arms crossed, her face twisted into an expression I had become far too familiar with over the past 3 years. Margaret was the HOA president, a title she wielded like a weapon. She was in her mid-50s, with short blonde hair that she kept in that trademark speak-to-the-manager style, and a personality that could curdle milk at 20 paces. Frank Norris. Her voice carried across the quiet street like a police siren. "Do you have any idea what time it is?" I kept shoveling. "Morning, Margaret. Sorry if I woke you." "Sorry." She was walking across the street now, her fuzzy slippers leaving footprints in the snow. The HOA bylaws clearly state that no outdoor maintenance can occur before 6 a.m. That includes snow removal. I paused, leaning on my shovel. The cold air burned in my lungs. "Margaret, my wife might need an ambulance at any moment. I am making sure they can reach our house. I don't care if the Pope is visiting." She pulled her phone from her bathrobe pocket. "Rules are rules. This is your 3rd violation this month. First, the Christmas lights stayed up past January 1st, then your garbage cans were visible from the street, and now this. The Christmas lights came down on January 2nd because Linda had a health scare on New Year's. The garbage cans were out because it was garbage day. And this," I gestured at the snow, "is literally a medical emergency." Margaret's finger was already moving across her phone screen. "I am calling the police. You are disturbing the peace and violating community standards." "You are going to call the police because I am shoveling snow." I couldn't keep the disbelief out of my voice. "And operating power equipment before permitted hours. I can hear your snow blower from here." "I am not using a snow blower. This is a shovel, a manual shovel." But Margaret was already talking to someone on the phone. "Yes, hello. I need to report a noise disturbance at 847 Maple Ridge Drive in Lakewood. The resident is operating heavy equipment before legal hours and refusing to stop despite multiple warnings." I stood there in the freezing pre-dawn darkness, watching this woman lie to police dispatch, and felt something inside me snap. Not into anger, but into a cold clarity. I pulled out my own phone and started recording. Margaret, for the record, I am using a manual shovel to clear snow because my pregnant wife has severe preeclampsia and may need emergency medical access at any time. Her doctor confirmed this yesterday. Margaret turned her back to me, still talking to the dispatcher. Yes, he is being verbally aggressive now. I feel threatened. I am standing in my own driveway holding a shovel, I said, still recording. I am approximately 15 feet away from you on my property. You came over here. 2 more doors opened on the street. Bill Hammond from 3 houses down appeared in his doorway, and Susan Chen from next door came out in her coat over pajamas. "What's going on?" Susan called out. She was a nurse at Denver General and had been incredibly kind to Linda over the past months, often checking in on her. "Frank is violating the HOA bylaws," Margaret announced, as if she were proclaiming a crime of the century. "And the police are on their way." Susan walked over to me, her expression concerned. "How is Linda doing?" "Not great. Doctor said yesterday we might need to induce early if her blood pressure doesn't stabilize. I'm just trying to make sure an ambulance can get here if we need one." Susan looked at the path I had been clearing, then at Margaret. "Margaret, he is preparing for a medical emergency." "Surely the bylaws allow exceptions for that." "The bylaws allow for nothing of the sort. If we make exceptions for everyone, the whole community falls apart." Bill Hammond had walked closer now, a big guy who worked construction. "Margaret, come on. This is ridiculous." "The rules apply to everyone equally," Margaret said, her voice rising. "If I let Frank break them, then everyone will want to break them. That is how neighborhoods turn into slums." I went back to shoveling. I didn't have time for this. Every minute I wasted arguing was another minute Linda might need to wait in an emergency. The scraping of the shovel against concrete was the only sound for a few moments, punctuated by Margaret's angry breathing. "Did you hear me?" She stepped closer. "The police are coming. You need to stop immediately." "Margaret," I said without stopping my work, "unless you have a court order, I am going to keep clearing this snow. You do what you need to do, and I will do what I need to do." Her face went red even in the dim light. "You are going to regret this. The HOA can fine you up to $500 per violation. We can put a lien on your house. We can make your life absolute hell." "You already do that," I muttered, probably not as quietly as I intended. "What did you say?" Susan stepped between us. "Margaret, go home. Let the man take care of his family. Don't tell me what to do. I am the president of this HOA, elected by the community." "You ran unopposed because no one else wanted to deal with the headache," Bill said. He had moved to stand near Susan, creating a buffer between Margaret and me. "And you have been on a power trip ever since. How dare you? I volunteer countless hours to keep this neighborhood beautiful and safe." "You harass people about the shade of their mailbox paint," Bill shot back. "That is not volunteering, that is being a busybody." Red and blue lights appeared at the entrance to our cul-de-sac. I kept shoveling, my heart pounding but my movement steady. I had done nothing wrong. I was on my property, clearing snow during what was technically a reasonable hour, even if it was before the arbitrary HOA cutoff. The police would see that. 2 officers emerged from the patrol car, their flashlights sweeping across the scene. One was a tall woman with dark hair pulled back, the other a shorter man with a thick mustache. They approached carefully, the way cops do when they don't know what situation they are walking into. Someone called about a disturbance. The female officer's voice was professional but not aggressive. Margaret rushed toward them before I could respond. "Officers, thank God you are here. This man has been operating heavy machinery since 4 in the morning, violating our community bylaws and disturbing the entire neighborhood." The male officer looked at me, then at the manual shovel in my hands. "That is your heavy machinery, sir." "Yes, officer. I am shoveling snow." "He is violating HOA rules," Margaret insisted. "The bylaws clearly state no outdoor maintenance before 6 a.m. The female officer, whose name tag read Officer Patricia Morrison, pulled out a notepad. "Sir, can you explain why you are shoveling at this hour?" I set down the shovel and pulled out my phone, showing them the video I had been taking. "My wife is 8 months pregnant with severe preeclampsia. Her doctor told us yesterday she might need emergency medical attention at any time. We live at the end of this cul-de-sac, and the city plows won't reach us for hours. I am clearing a path so an ambulance can access our house if necessary." Officer Morrison watched the video, which included Margaret's phone call to the police and her statement about feeling threatened. Her expression remained neutral, but I saw something shift in her eyes. "Madam," she said, turning to Margaret, "you stated on the call that you felt threatened, yes. He was being aggressive. He is standing in his driveway on his property, holding a shovel and speaking in a calm voice according to this video." Well, his tone was threatening. The male officer, Officer James Kowalski according to his tag, had walked over to examine the path I had been clearing. "Sir, you are clearing beyond your property line." "Yes, sir. I am trying to create access to my house for emergency vehicles. The street is too narrow with all this snow." "That is city property," Margaret interjected. "He has no right to clear the street without permission." Officer Kowalski looked at her, then back at me. "Technically, she is right. But given the circumstances and the fact you are improving emergency access, I don't see an issue." "But the HOA bylaws," Margaret started. "Madam," Officer Morrison cut her off, "HOA bylaws don't supersede someone's right to prepare for a medical emergency. If his wife needs emergency services, having clear access could save her life. So he just gets to break the rules whenever he wants." "Is there a specific municipal ordinance about snow removal times in Lakewood?" I asked the officers. Officer Morrison checked her phone for a moment. "The city noise ordinance prohibits power equipment before 7 a.m. on weekdays. Manual snow removal is exempt, especially for safety purposes." "There," Margaret said triumphantly. 7 a.m. It is only, she checked her phone, 5:15. He is still in violation of the power equipment ordinance, which doesn't apply to a manual shovel, Officer Kowalski said, his patience clearly wearing thin. "Madam, did you really call 911 for this?" I called the non-emergency line. "You told dispatch he was being verbally aggressive and you felt threatened. That routes to emergency dispatch." Margaret's face flushed. "Well, I did feel threatened." Officer Morrison looked at me. "Sir, have you made any threatening statements or gestures toward this woman?" "No, madam. I have been shoveling snow. She came onto my property and confronted me." "That is not true. I was on the street, which is public property." I played another section of the video, which clearly showed Margaret's slippers creating a trail from her house, across the street, and onto my driveway. "She is standing on my driveway here," I pointed out. Officer Morrison's expression had gone from neutral to annoyed. "Madam, filing a false police report is a crime. Claiming you felt threatened when video evidence shows otherwise can result in charges." Margaret's eyes went wide. "I didn't file a false report. I was concerned about community standards." "You told dispatch he was being verbally aggressive and you felt threatened. That is not about community standards. That is a claim of threatening behavior." "I want to press charges," Margaret said suddenly, "for violating the HOA bylaws. That is legally binding." Officer Kowalski sighed. "Madam, The police don't enforce HOA bylaws. That is a civil matter between you and the homeowner. If you want to fine him or pursue other remedies, you need to go through your HOA process, not call 911. So you are not going to do anything. About a man shoveling snow on his property to prepare for a potential medical emergency. No, madam, we are not going to do anything about that. A light came on in my house. My stomach dropped. Linda was awake. The commotion had probably woken her, and stress was the last thing she needed right now. Officers, I need to check on my wife, I said. Officer Morrison nodded. Go ahead. We are done here. I hurried toward my house, my boots crunching in the snow. Behind me, I could hear Margaret still arguing with the officers, her voice shrill in the quiet morning. I didn't care. All that mattered was Linda. I found her in the living room, standing by the window, one hand on her swollen belly. Her face was pale, her blonde hair messy from sleep. Frank, what's going on? Are those police lights? It is nothing, honey. Margaret being Margaret, how are you feeling? I heard yelling and shoveling. What time is it? Early. I was clearing the driveway in case we need to get to the hospital. Her eyes filled with tears. I'm so tired of this. The HOA, Margaret, feeling like a prisoner in our own home. I put my arms around her, feeling the baby kick against my stomach. I know, but all that matters is keeping you and this baby safe. Margaret can fine us, Lee, in the house, whatever she wants. You are what is important. My head hurts, she said softly. That was a warning sign. Bad, it is getting there. Okay, let me finish the driveway and then we will call Dr. Sarah Chen. She said to call any time if you get a headache. Linda nodded against my chest. I am scared. I know, baby. But we are prepared. The hospital is ready, your doctor is on call, and the driveway will be clear. Everything is going to be okay. I got her settled back in bed with her blood pressure monitor and her phone within reach. She had a direct line to her doctor's service, and I made her promise to call if the headache got worse or if she noticed any other symptoms. Then I went back outside. The police were still there, but now Margaret looked furious. Officer Morrison was writing something in her notepad while Officer Kowalski stood with his arms crossed, blocking Margaret from moving toward my property. Mr. Norris, Officer Morrison called out when she saw me. Is your wife all right? She has a headache. We might need to go to the hospital soon. Then, by all means, finish clearing your access route. If Miss Peterson continues to interfere, call us back. Margaret's mouth opened and closed like a fish. You cannot be serious. He is violating community bylaws. And you are wasting police resources on a civil matter during a snowstorm when we have actual emergencies to attend to, Officer Kowalski said. His professional patience had clearly evaporated. If you call 911 again tonight about this, I will charge you with abusing emergency services. Do you understand? This is ridiculous. The HOA has legal authority. Then exercise it through legal channels. Write him a citation, schedule a hearing, file whatever paperwork you need to file. But do it during normal business hours and without claiming you are in danger when you are not. The officers returned to their patrol car and drove off, leaving Margaret standing in the middle of the street. Susan and Bill were still watching from their respective positions. You are going to regret this, Margaret said to me. I am calling an emergency HOA board meeting. By the end of the week, you will have so many fines you won't be able to afford to live here. Do what you have to do, Margaret, and I am going to recommend we revoke your access to community amenities. No pool, no clubhouse, no playground. I don't use any of those anyway. We will make your life hell until you comply or leave. Bill stepped forward. Margaret, go home. You are embarrassing yourself. Stay out of this, Bill, unless you want to be next on my list. Your list? Susan laughed without humor. You mean your vendetta against anyone who doesn't bow down to your petty tyranny. I maintain standards. Without me, this neighborhood would fall apart. Without you, I said quietly, this neighborhood might actually be a pleasant place to live. Margaret's face went purple. She pointed a shaking finger at me. Emergency board meeting, Thursday night, 7 p.m. You are required to attend. And if I don't, my wife might be in the hospital, then you will be fined for missing a mandatory meeting. She stormed back to her house, slamming her door hard enough that more lights came on throughout the neighborhood. I stood there in the growing dawn light, exhausted and worried and angry all at once. "Frank," Susan said gently, "I will testify at any hearing that this was medically necessary. I am a medical professional and I can document the need for emergency access." "Thanks, Susan, I appreciate that." Bill clapped me on the shoulder. "I will be there too. Margaret has gone too far this time. Half the neighborhood is sick of her power trips. I just want to take care of my wife." "I know, buddy. We will handle Margaret. You focus on Linda." I went back to shoveling. The sky was lightening now, going from black to deep blue. More neighbors emerged as their alarms went off, preparing for work. Several stopped to ask about Linda, and every single one of them offered support. It turned out I wasn't the only one who had been on the receiving end of Margaret's wrath. Tom Williams, who lived 2 doors down, had been fined for having his trash cans out 15 minutes past pickup time. Rachel Foster had been cited for planting flowers that were not on the approved list. David Nguyen had gotten a violation notice because his son's bike was visible in the driveway. The stories went on and on, a litany of petty enforcement and arbitrary rules. By 6:30, I had cleared a path wide enough for any emergency vehicle to reach my house. My back ached, my hands were blistered even through my gloves, and I was exhausted. But when I looked at the clear route from the street to my garage, I felt a grim satisfaction. Whatever Margaret did, Linda would be safe. I went inside and made breakfast. Linda came downstairs slowly, her hand on the railing, her face still pale but her headache apparently better. We ate together in silence, both of us too tired and worried to make conversation. Her blood pressure reading was high but not critical. "Not yet." "I hate that woman," Linda said finally. "She is not worth the energy. She is trying to drive us out of our home while I am pregnant, while I am sick. What kind of person does that?" I didn't have an answer. I had spent 3 years trying to understand Margaret's motivations, and I had come up empty every time. Some people just seem to need power over others, no matter how small or petty that power might be. The next 2 days passed in tense anticipation. Linda's condition remained stable but precarious. We went to the doctor on Wednesday, and Dr. Sarah Chen confirmed what we had all suspected. She would need to induce labor within the next week, possibly sooner if Linda's blood pressure continued to climb. Meanwhile, Margaret had apparently been busy. I found 3 separate violation notices on my door when I got home from the doctor. One for the early morning snow removal. One for having my car parked on the street overnight while I cleared the driveway, which was apparently prohibited between midnight and 6 a.m. And one for removing snow from city property without permission. Each violation carried a $250 fine. $750 total. The notices informed me that I was required to attend the emergency board meeting on Thursday, and that failure to appear would result in additional fines and possible legal action. I showed Linda the notices, and she started crying. Not the soft tears of earlier, but deep, wrenching sobs that shook her whole body. Her blood pressure monitor started beeping. The numbers were climbing. "Linda, honey, breathe. You need to calm down. We can't afford this. The medical bills, the baby, and now this. We can't afford it." "We will figure it out," I can contest the fines. Most of them are bogus anyway. But it will cost money to contest them. We'll need a lawyer. And Margaret won't stop. She will keep doing this until we have to sell the house. The monitor kept beeping. Her blood pressure was now in the danger zone. I called Dr. Chen's service, and within 10 minutes I was talking to the doctor herself. "Get her to the hospital now," Dr. Chen said. "Don't wait for an ambulance. If you can drive safely, that will be faster." I got Linda into the car, grabbed the hospital bag we had packed weeks ago, and backed out of the driveway onto the perfectly clear street. The path I had cleared made it possible to navigate quickly and safely. If I had waited until a reasonable hour to shovel, we might have been stuck. The drive to Denver Presbyterian Medical Center took 20 minutes through morning traffic. Linda was admitted immediately, and within an hour they had started medication to bring down her blood pressure and prepare for an emergency C-section, if necessary. I sat in the hospital room, holding Linda's hand while machines beeped around us, and tried not to think about Margaret or HOA meetings or violation notices. None of it mattered. This was what mattered: Linda and our baby. But Thursday evening came, and with it the mandatory HOA meeting. Linda was stable. The doctors had managed to get her blood pressure under control, and they were hoping to delay the delivery for at least a few more days. She insisted I go to the meeting. "Don't let her bully us," Linda said. "We did nothing wrong. You were protecting me and the baby." "I know. But I don't want to leave you. My mom is on her way. She will be here in an hour. Go to the meeting. Fight this." So at 6:45 on Thursday evening, I walked into the Maple Ridge Estates clubhouse for the emergency board meeting. The room was packed. Margaret sat at a table at the front with two other board members, Harold Chen and Patricia Williams, both of whom looked uncomfortable. Harold was Susan Chen's husband, and Patricia was Tom Williams's wife. They had both been elected to the board mostly because no one else wanted the job. The folding chairs were filled with neighbors, maybe 40 people in total. I saw Susan and Bill near the front. Tom, Rachel, David, and a dozen others I recognized. Margaret's eyes locked onto me as I entered, and a smug smile crossed her face. "Now that Mr. Norris has finally decided to grace us with his presence, we can begin," she announced. "I was at the hospital with my wife," I said. "She was admitted 2 days ago." A murmur went through the crowd. Margaret waved her hand dismissively. "We are here to discuss multiple serious violations of community bylaws committed by Mr. Norris. Harold, please read the charges." Harold Chen looked miserable. He cleared his throat and read from a paper in front of him. "Frank Norris is charged with performing outdoor maintenance before permitted hours, parking on the street during prohibited hours, and removing snow from city property without authorization. The total fines amount to $750. "That is ridiculous." Susan stood up. "He was preparing for a medical emergency." "The bylaws make no exceptions for perceived emergencies," Margaret said. "If we allow people to break rules whenever they claim an emergency, chaos will ensue." "Perceived emergency." Susan's voice rose. "I am a nurse. I examined Linda 2 days before this happened. Her condition was critical. Frank did exactly what he should have done. He should have requested an exception from the board in advance. It was 4 in the morning during a snowstorm. Exactly when was he supposed to request this exception?" Margaret's jaw tightened. "The rules exist for a reason." Bill stood up next. "I move that we dismiss all charges against Frank. This is a clear abuse of HOA authority." "You don't have standing to make a motion. You're not on the board," Margaret snapped. "Actually," Patricia Williams spoke up quietly, "homeowners can make motions during open meetings. It is in the bylaws, Section 12. Margaret shot her a glare. "Fine. Does the motion have a second?" "I second," Tom Williams called out. All in favor of dismissing the charges? Patricia asked. Hands went up throughout the room. I counted quickly. At least 30 people had their hands raised. This is not a vote of the general membership, Margaret said loudly. Only the board can vote on violations. Actually, Harold said, checking his own copy of the bylaws, according to Section 15, any homeowner can request a full membership vote on disciplinary actions. It requires 10 homeowners to request it. Who's in favor of having a full membership vote? Bill asked. Nearly every hand in the room went up. Margaret's face had gone from red to almost purple. This is a coup. You are all trying to undermine the legitimate authority of this board. We are exercising our rights as homeowners, Rachel Foster said, rights that you have been trampling on for years. I have done nothing but serve this community faithfully. You have harassed, bullied, and abused every homeowner in this development, David Nguyen said. This is not about Frank. This is about your pattern of behavior. The meeting devolved into chaos. People were standing, shouting, waving papers. Margaret was banging a gavel on the table, demanding order. Harold and Patricia sat frozen, clearly unsure how to proceed. My phone buzzed. It was Linda's mother. The baby is coming. They are doing the C-section now. I stood up. I have to go. My wife is having the baby. The room went silent. Margaret opened her mouth to object, but Susan cut her off. Go, Frank. We will handle this. I ran. I ran out of that clubhouse, across the parking lot to my car. The hospital was 20 minutes away, but I made it in 15. I found Linda's mother in the waiting area outside the surgical wing. They just took her in, Ellen Wright said. She's scared but stable. The doctors think everything will be fine. I paced the waiting room for what felt like hours but was probably only 45 minutes. Finally, a nurse emerged and told me I could come in. I followed her through a maze of hallways to a recovery room, and there was Linda, pale and exhausted but smiling. And in her arms was a tiny, perfect baby girl. Meet our daughter, Linda whispered. I couldn't speak. I just stood there, staring at this miracle, this beautiful little person who had nearly cost us everything but who was worth everything and more. The nurse showed me how to hold her, and I sat down in the chair next to Linda's bed with my daughter in my arms, and everything else just fell away. We named her Emma after Linda's grandmother. She was 6 pounds 3 ounces, a little small but healthy and strong. The doctors were pleased with both of them. Linda's blood pressure had stabilized after the delivery, and Emma's vitals were perfect. We stayed in the hospital for 3 days. During that time, my phone blew up with messages from neighbors. The HOA meeting had apparently continued after I left, and what happened next was something I would not have believed if I hadn't seen the documentation later. After I left, Susan had stood up and formally requested a vote of no confidence in Margaret Peterson as HOA president. The bylaws, which Margaret had used as a weapon against everyone else, actually contained provisions for removing board members for abuse of power. It required a 2/3 vote of homeowners present at the meeting. The vote was 42-3. Margaret, and apparently 2 elderly neighbors who hadn't been paying attention, were the only ones who voted to keep her in place. Margaret had been removed as president effective immediately. The board had then voted to appoint Harold Chen as interim president until a special election could be held. But that was not all. Harold's first act as president was to review all violations issued by Margaret over the past year. He discovered that she had issued over 300 violation notices, collected over $40,000 in fines, and used a significant portion of that money for personal expenses, claiming they were HOA-related costs. Specifically, Margaret had spent HOA funds on a new laptop, claiming she needed it for HOA work. She had spent money on meals, claiming they were for board meetings that never happened. She had even billed the HOA for mileage to drive around the neighborhood looking for violations, at a rate far higher than the IRS standard. Harold had contacted an attorney. The attorney had looked at the books and told Harold that Margaret had likely committed embezzlement. Harold called the police. I learned all of this from text messages and emails while sitting in the hospital room, watching Linda nurse Emma. It felt surreal. 2 days ago, Margaret had been threatening to ruin us. Now she was under investigation for theft. When we finally came home on Sunday, there was a small crowd of neighbors waiting to greet us. Someone had shoveled our driveway and cleared our sidewalks. Someone else had left a casserole and a basket of groceries on our porch. There were balloons tied to our mailbox and a banner that said, "Welcome home, Emma." Susan was there with a genuine smile on her face. The whole neighborhood chipped in. "We wanted you to come home to something nice." "Thank you," I said. I was holding Emma's car seat, and Linda was walking slowly beside me, still recovering from the surgery. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything. Margaret put us all through hell. What she did to you was just the final straw." Bill helped me carry things inside while the neighbors cooed over Emma. Linda sat on the couch, exhausted but happy, while our daughter slept in her arms. I looked around at our home, at our friends, at our new family, and felt something I hadn't felt in 3 years: peace. The next week, Margaret was formally charged with embezzlement and fraud. The investigation revealed that over the past 5 years, she had stolen nearly $60,000 from the HOA through false expense reports, inflated vendor invoices from companies that turned out to be owned by her relatives, and direct transfers to her personal account. She had hidden it through complicated bookkeeping and by intimidating anyone who questioned her authority. The district attorney took the case seriously. Embezzlement of HOA funds was a growing problem in Colorado, and they wanted to make an example. Margaret initially tried to claim that everything was legitimate, but the forensic accountant the police brought in shredded her defense. She had been meticulous about enforcing the rules on everyone else, but apparently thought she was above them herself. Linda and I watched from the sidelines as the case progressed. We had our hands full with Emma, who turned out to be a colicky baby who didn't sleep much. We were exhausted and happy in equal measure. The HOA drama felt like something from another life. Harold Chen proved to be an excellent president. He immediately suspended all of Margaret's pending violations and established a review committee to look at the bylaws. It turned out that many of the rules Margaret had been enforcing so strictly were either outdated or had never actually been properly voted on by the membership. She had simply declared them to be rules and used her authority to enforce them. The special election for new board members was held in March. Harold was elected president officially, along with Susan as vice president and a guy named Robert Chen, no relation, as treasurer. Their platform was simple: reasonable rules, reasonable enforcement, and transparency in all financial matters. One of their first acts was to formally rescind my violation notices and refund any fines I had paid over the past 3 years. It turned out I had paid Margaret nearly $2,000 for various petty violations, everything from having my grass a 1/4 inch too long to having non-approved house numbers. All of it refunded, with interest. Margaret's criminal case went to trial in June. Emma was 5 months old by then, starting to laugh and roll over. Linda had recovered fully from her pregnancy complications. We both took a day off to attend the sentencing hearing. The courtroom in Jefferson County was smaller than I expected. Margaret sat at the defense table with her attorney, a tired-looking public defender who had apparently tried to get her to take a plea deal multiple times. She had refused, insisting she had done nothing wrong. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Judge Roberts, was not sympathetic. She listened to the evidence, which was overwhelming. The forensic accountant testified about the stolen funds. Multiple homeowners testified about Margaret's intimidation tactics and abuse of power. Harold presented the HOA's internal investigation results. Margaret's defense was that she had been acting in the best interest of the community, and that any money she spent was justified by the work she did. Her attorney tried to paint her as an overworked volunteer who had made some mistakes in bookkeeping, but had no criminal intent. The prosecution, a sharp younger man named Daniel Foster, demolished that argument. He showed that Margaret had systematically stolen from the HOA over 5 years, had gone to great lengths to hide her theft, and had used her position of power to prevent anyone from questioning her. This was not a mistake. This was calculated fraud. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. They found Margaret guilty on all counts: embezzlement, fraud, and abuse of authority. Each count carried potential prison time. At the sentencing hearing 2 weeks later, Judge Roberts was scathing. "Mrs. Peterson, you were entrusted with a position of responsibility in your community. Rather than serve that community, you used your position to enrich yourself and to bully and intimidate your neighbors. You showed no remorse, no understanding of the harm you caused, and no willingness to take responsibility for your actions. This court sentences you to 4 years in prison, followed by 5 years of probation. You are also ordered to pay full restitution of $60,000 to the Maple Ridge Estates HOA, plus damages and court costs." Margaret finally showed emotion then. She started crying, loud and messy, begging the judge for mercy. Her attorney put a hand on her shoulder, but she shook him off. She turned to look at the gallery where several of us sat, and her face twisted with hate. "This is your fault," she screamed, pointing at me. "If you had just followed the rules, none of this would have happened. You destroyed my life." The judge banged her gavel. "Mrs. Peterson, control yourself." He was shoveling snow. That is all he was doing, and he destroyed everything. "You destroyed everything yourself," Judge Roberts said coldly. "You stole from your neighbors, you abused your authority, and you showed no mercy to anyone who crossed you. Now you will face the consequences of those choices. Bailiff, remove her." Margaret was led away, still screaming about injustice and conspiracy. I sat there, holding Linda's hand, and felt nothing but pity. She had done this to herself. Every choice, every petty enforcement, every dollar stolen. All her own choices. We walked out of the courthouse into bright summer sunshine. Emma was with Linda's mother for the day, and we decided to take ourselves out to lunch. We went to a little Italian place in downtown Lakewood and sat on the patio, watching people walk by. "Is it over?" Linda asked. "Yeah, it's over. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for her to appeal or file some lawsuit or something. She might appeal, but the evidence was pretty solid, and even if she does, that is not our problem anymore. We have Emma, we have our home, we have our lives back." Linda smiled. It was the first time I had seen her really, genuinely smile in months. "We do, don't we? We do." The HOA under Harold's leadership was like night and day compared to Margaret's reign. The rules were still enforced, but reasonably. If your grass got a little long, you got a friendly reminder, not a fine. If you painted your mailbox the wrong color, someone would politely let you know and give you time to fix it. It was what an HOA should be. A group of neighbors working together to maintain their community, not a dictatorship ruled by petty tyrants. Emma grew. She learned to crawl, then walk, then talk. Her first word was "Dada," which made my entire year. We had family barbecues in our backyard and invited the neighbors. Susan and Bill became close friends. Harold and his wife Joyce were regular dinner companions. The neighborhood became what we had hoped it would be when we first moved in, a community. I still thought about that morning sometimes. The pre-dawn darkness, the scrape of the shovel, the moment Margaret came storming across the street. How different things might have been if she had just let me clear the snow, if she had shown even a shred of understanding or compassion. But she hadn't. And in trying to punish me for breaking her rules, she had exposed herself. All the theft, all the abuse of power, all of it came to light because she could not stand the thought of someone defying her authority. Even when that defiance was motivated by love and fear, and the desperate need to protect my family. There was irony in that. Margaret had always talked about the importance of following rules, of maintaining standards, of keeping the community together. But she had been the one breaking the most important rules of all. She had stolen from her neighbors, betrayed their trust, and torn the community apart with her need for control. The snow removal at dawn had just been the catalyst, the match that lit the fuse. Everything else had been waiting to explode. 2 years after Emma was born, Linda got pregnant again. The pregnancy was normal this time, no complications, no preeclampsia. We had a son and we named him David. The morning Linda went into labor, it was raining, and I drove her to the hospital on perfectly clear roads, no snow removal required. But before we left, I looked at our driveway, remembered that morning in the pre-dawn cold, and felt grateful. Grateful for the warning signs that made me prepare. Grateful for the neighbors who stood up with me. Grateful for the system that, eventually, held Margaret accountable for her actions. And grateful that my daughter was born healthy and safe, despite Margaret's best efforts to stop me from preparing for her arrival. Margaret served 3.5 years of her sentence before being released on parole. I heard she moved somewhere out of state, maybe Arizona or New Mexico. I never saw her again. Sometimes I wondered if she ever understood what she had done, if she ever felt real remorse. I doubted it. Some people never learn. The HOA board created a new position after everything happened. A community ombudsman. Someone whose job was to mediate disputes before they escalated, to make sure the rules were being applied fairly, and to provide a check on the board's authority. It was a volunteer position, and Bill Hammond took it on. He was perfect for it, level-headed and fair-minded. Life went on. Emma started preschool. David learned to walk. Linda went back to work part-time, teaching art classes at the community center. I got a promotion at work. We planted a garden, got a dog, lived our lives. The house on Maple Ridge Drive was home now. Really home. Not because the building was special, but because the people around us were special. Because we had been through something together, faced down a bully together, and come out stronger on the other side. Sometimes, on winter mornings when it snowed, I would get up early and shovel the driveway. Not out of fear or urgency, just because it needed to be done. Emma would sometimes come out with me, wrapped in her puffy coat, and help with her little plastic shovel. I would tell her about the morning she was born, about the snow and the lights and the kind neighbors who stood up for what was right. She was too young to understand the full story. But someday she would. Someday I would tell her about standing up for your family, about doing what is right even when someone tries to stop you, about how communities fall apart when power goes unchecked. But for now, we just shoveled snow together in the quiet dawn, her laughter echoing off the houses around us, and I was content. The fight was over. The battle was won. My family was safe and happy and home, and that was all that really mattered in the end. Not the HOA rules or the violation notices or the court cases or the prison sentences. Just my family, my home, and the knowledge that when it mattered most, I had done the right thing. I had cleared the path for the ambulance. I had protected my wife and daughter. And I had stood my ground against someone who thought power made her untouchable. She learned differently. And my neighborhood learned that communities are built on trust, fairness, and compassion, not on rules and fines and fear. The snow kept falling that winter and every winter after. And every time it did, I went out and cleared my driveway. Sometimes before dawn, sometimes after. Whenever it needed to be done. And no one ever complained again. Because everyone understood what I had been trying to do all along: prepare, protect, provide. The three most important things you can do for your family. Everything else is just details.